So to get a bit of a running start on where we are right now, and it's a good thing to review, just even for those of us who have been here a while. After the Persian Empire, which we see at the end of the Old Testament, we had the Greeks. Alexander came in, he conquered pretty much the world at that time. And after his death, that kingdom split. It did not remain an empire, it was divided into kingdoms. And two of those kingdoms were the Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids in Syria and Babylonia. And they had the biggest chunk, at least land-wise. And those are the kings of the north and the south that we see described in the book of Daniel. A lot of this stuff that we've been talking about so far, and we're getting right to the end of that part, was prophesied in the book of Daniel, including the coming of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a king of the Seleucid Empire, who for a lot of different reasons, began persecuting the Jews. He made Judaism illegal, began killing anyone who was found with a copy of the book of the law, killing mothers who circumcised their kids, their sons, along with the sons themselves. And in response to that, one man, Mattathias, really sparked a rebellion out in the backwoods of Judea, killed an Israelite man who had come to offer sacrifice to Zeus, along with the man who was trying to get them to make those sacrifices, the official. He started a rebellion. He and his sons led a group of Israelites out into the wilderness. More people and more people began coming to them. The conservatives, those who wanted to keep to the law of God. And their leader, after Mattathias died, was Judas Maccabeus, which means the hammer. So Judas Maccabeus had a series of victories, incredible victories over other forces, not just the Seleucids, but other armies around them that came against them, and began to be a significant military force. And last week, we just saw him experience his first defeat after the death of Antiochus Epiphanes. His son became the king. He wasn't supposed to, because Antiochus was the was the uncle of the next king in line. But he made his own son king instead, and that's going to cause problems that we're going to see today. And another thing he did was he changed the regent, the man who was in charge of the kingdom, in charge of raising his son. It was Lysias, but he gave a man named Philip that authority, told Philip to raise his son, Antiochus V. But Antiochus V heard from the Jews in Jerusalem, those who were still loyal to the Seleucids, who were Greek in their thinking, and were persecuted by the Hebrews, the traditional Jews, for that reason. He heard from them that they were besieged, that they were being attacked by Judas and his followers, and he got angry about that, marched south with a large army, with elephants, and there was a battle, actually. We're getting into what I have slides for here. This is Antiochus V, Eupator, son of Antiochus Epiphanes. We have his face on a coin there. And so you have that division within the kingdom is going to be very important, that Antiochus Epiphanes made by making his son the next king. Yeah, the Hellenists and the remaining Seleucids controlled the Jerusalem citadel. So there was a little fortification within Jerusalem, excuse me, that was right next to the temple. In fact, it overlooked the temple. From the top of the citadel, you could see down into where they were offering sacrifices. And they would cause disruption for the worshipers in the temple. When they thought they could get away with it, they would attack people and were making people afraid to go to the temple and worship. And because of this disruption, because they were kind of a thorn in the side of Jerusalem, Judas decided that they needed to be rooted out. So he surrounded the citadel, he besieged them, but they managed to get a few people out, as I've already said, and get word to Antiochus V that they were in trouble. And one of the people who were holed up there in Jerusalem with the other Hellenists was a man named Menelaus, who we've already heard about. Menelaus was the official high priest. He wasn't from a high priestly family. He shouldn't have been high priest, but he bribed Antiochus Epiphanes to give him that position. He's still around. He's still alive. He's still with the Greekish Jews in Jerusalem, one of those sending this distress call. So Antiochus V and Lysias, because Lysias, even though Philip was told, "You're in charge of my son now," Lysias would not give up his power as regent. Antiochus V and Lysias together marched south from Antioch, their capital, in response to this request. And you see that red dotted line, that's their army coming down from the north, and they swung south, came up at Jerusalem from that direction. And right here, you see that little battle icon and the bubble that says death of Eleazar. Remember, in that battle that they fought, that first defeat, the brother of Judas, a man named Eleazar, saw an enormous elephant with what he thought royal decorations and assumed that the king himself was on that elephant and sacrificed his life to bring it down. Fought his way to it, stabbed it in the belly, it fell down on top of him, and he died. But Judah's army was defeated. They turned and fled. They realized they could not withstand this army. And they fled the dotted green line. The solid green line is them coming down from Jerusalem. The dotted green line shows where they went. They went up into the Gophna Hills north of Jerusalem, leaving the king's forces free to march against Jerusalem itself. And if you read ahead on the handout last week, you know more or less what happened. We're going to start on page 1 with that section from 1 Maccabees chapter 6. It says, "The soldiers of the king's army went up to Jerusalem against them, and the king encamped in Judea and at Mount Zion." So most of Jerusalem is in control of the conservatives, Judah's people. Within the city, you have the Hellenists, who are still holed up in their citadel, and around the city on the outside, you have the king's army. So kind of a siege within a siege. But he, Antiochus V, set up siege towers, engines of war to throw fire and stones, machines to shoot arrows and catapults. The Jews also made engines of war to match theirs, and fought for many days. but they had no food in storage because it was the 7th year. Those who found safety in Judea from the Gentiles had consumed the last of the stores. Few men were left in the sanctuary, because famine had prevailed over the rest, and they had been scattered, each to his own place. They left the city because they didn't have enough food to sustain them, because it was the 7th year, and they were following the law. They were not planting the 7th year. They were giving the land its rest. So this could have, at this point, ended very badly for Israel, and they could have gone right back to how they were under the yoke of hostile Seleucid forces. But, as it so happened, Lysias heard that Philip, whom King Antiochus IV, while still living, had appointed to bring up Antiochus his son to be king, had returned from Persia and Media with the forces that had gone with the king, and that he was trying to seize control of the government. So Philip has been told by Antiochus IV, you're in charge. So he's coming back with a portion of the army to Antioch, while Lysias and Antiochus V are down fighting. So they have problems at home. Lysias knows that if he doesn't go back, if he doesn't fight Philip now, he's no longer going to be regent. Antiochus V may not even be king. Philip is trying to seize the kingdom for himself. And so that puts Lysias in a perilous predicament here if he decides to stay in Judea. So he quickly gave orders to depart and said to the king, to the commanders of the forces, and to the men, we daily grow weaker. Our food supply is scant. The place against which we are fighting is strong, and the affairs of the kingdom press urgently upon us. Now then, let us come to terms with these men, and make peace with them and with their nation, and agree to let them live by their laws as they did before. For it was on account of their laws that were abolished that they became angry and did all these things. Because it will not hurt us in any way to just let the Jews be Jews. Give them what they want. And then we can go back, we can abandon this war. And the speech pleased the king and the commanders, and he sent to the Jews an offer of peace, and they accepted it. So the king and the commanders gave them their oath. On these conditions, the Jews evacuated the stronghold. But when the king entered Mount Zion and saw what a strong fortress the place was, he broke the oath he had sworn and commanded and tore down the wall all around. Then he departed with haste and returned to Antioch. He found Philip in control of the city, but he fought against him and took the city by force. So the king made peace with the Jews. He entered Jerusalem, recognized that it was a very strong fortress, decided he was going to tear down the walls. And we've seen this done several times. It's a big deal, especially going through Nehemiah. We see the problem that this caused for a nation not to have a walled capital. The difference between a city and a village was the wall that made it defensible. And if a nation's capital did not have a city, a walled city to defend, they basically weren't a nation. They couldn't defend themselves from other nations. They could not be feared. And so he crippled the Jewish nation in this way before returning and fighting his own war against Philip. And in 2nd Maccabees, on the next page there, in the next column, we have a few letters that have been preserved. And 2nd Maccabees, the chronology is a little bit weird here. And It's most likely the result of some historical confusion, a mistake that the writer of Second Maccabees made. But he has two different. I can't remember exactly how it is, but he has the invasion of um, Judea by Lysias in a different place than the writer of First Maccabees and Josephus. So most likely it's the author of Second Maccabees who's wrong. He's a little bit less historically careful than the other writers. Um, but these letters that he preserves most likely are genuine. They sound like letters that Greeks would write, not letters that a very, very religious Hebrew would make up. So this is the king's letter to Lysias. So from King Antiochus V to Lysias concerning the situation in Judea. King Antiochus to his brother Lysias, greetings. Now that our father has gone on to the gods, so this is pretty shortly after his father's death, we desire that the subjects of the kingdom be undisturbed in caring for their own affairs. We have heard that the Jews do not consent to our father's change to Greek customs, but prefer their own way of living, and ask that their own customs be allowed them. Accordingly, since we choose that this nation also be free from disturbance, our decision is that their temple be restored to them, and that they live according to the customs of their ancestors. You will do well, therefore, to send word to them and give them pledges of friendship, so that they may know our policy and be of good cheer and go on happily in the conduct of their own affairs. So this is the official declaration that Judaism is condoned by the Seleucid Empire. And King Antiochus also wrote a letter to the nation of Israel that says, King Antiochus, to the Senate of the Jews and to the other Jews, greeting. If you are well, it is as we desire. We also are in good health. Menelaus has informed us that you wish to return home and look after your own affairs. Now this is, okay, let me back up here a little bit. This is after that initial piece and after they left. So this is making everything official here. When they left Jerusalem, the Seleucids took with them prisoner certain of the Jews that were causing trouble, including Menelaus, the official high priest. He's with them now. And this is saying, Menelaus has informed us that you wish to return home and look after your own affairs. Therefore, those who go home by the 13th of Xanthicus will have our pledge of friendship and full permission for the Jews to enjoy their own food and laws, just as formerly. And none of them shall be molested in any way for what he may have done in ignorance. And I have also sent Menelaus to encourage you. Farewell. That's on the 148th year, Xanthicus 15th. So he gives them 15 days, says if you leave in 15 days, you can go back to Jerusalem. And as I've sent Menelaus to encourage you. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But when right around this same time, we also have another letter to the nation of Israel, to the people of the Jews, from some Roman ambassadors that happened to be there. Not in Judea, but with King Antiochus after he returned to Antioch. Or, no, because they're going to Antioch. Honestly, I don't know the exact chronology and all of the details and where everybody was geographically throughout all of this time when these letters are being sent. But The Romans sent them a letter saying, Quintus Memmius and Titus Mannius, envoys of the Romans, to the people of the Jews, greeting. With regard to what Lysias, the kinsman of the king, has granted you, we also give consent. That's very interesting. So, okay, I'm just going to keep reading the rest of the letter here. But as to the matters that he decided are to be referred to the king, as soon as you have considered them, send someone promptly, so that we may make proposals appropriate for you, for we are on our way to Antioch. Therefore make haste, and send some men, so that we may know your disposition. Farewell, the 148th year, Xanthicus 15th. So posted the same day as King Antiochus's message to the Jewish captives. So what the Romans are doing here, they're putting their oar in, getting involved in the situation, saying, yeah, what Lysias said, what he has granted you, we give consent to. They're claiming an authority here. They're saying, yes, we agree. We also give you permission. And they're also saying about the things that he didn't give you a direct answer on right away, the things that he referred to the king. Let's talk about those things. Let's see if we can work something out between us. So they're definitely trying to go behind the back of the Seleucids and behave like they're the ones in charge, behave like they're the ones with the real power and authority, which in a way they are. The Seleucid kingdom at this point, remember, was very dominated by Rome. They were under a very strict treaty with Rome that they had already been breaking by having elephants in their army. But this is the first time the Romans appear in the story. They will come back again, obviously. But they have an interest. Rome always has an interest in keeping its enemies weak. And one of the ways they did this was by supporting the underdog, supporting the small, struggling kingdoms against the larger kingdoms that Rome considered dangerous. So they had this peace. The Jews and the Seleucids arrived at this peace largely because of the division that existed within the Seleucid kingdom, not because they couldn't have just won if they had stuck it out. They definitely could have. But this peace was not agreeable at all to Judas and his followers. They were not happy about this. A lot of his followers were. A lot of his followers said, good, we've gotten what we want, the fight is over, and they left his army. But Judas and his family at this point were not happy with just religious freedom. That's not what they were fighting for. They wanted political freedom as well. They did not trust the Seleucids, and they wanted their independence. And this was a dramatic step away from that. But about Menelaus, about the official high priest, the backside of your page is from the Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus, the big work of history that is our main source for most of the time between the Old and New Testament in the Jewish nation. And the translation that I have of Josephus is a little bit older than my translation of the books of the Maccabees, so it's a little bit harder to read. But this is what we learn about Menelaus. So probably very shortly after that letter was sent that mentioned Menelaus, Lysias advised the king to slay him, to slay Menelaus, if he would have the Jews be quiet, be at peace, and cause him no further disturbance. Because this man, Menelaus, was the origin of all the mischief the Jews had done them by persuading his father, Antiochus the Fourth, to compel the Jews to leave the religion of their fathers. So Menelaus gets all the blame for this. He was the one who let Antiochus into the temple treasury and was very much on his side. Whether he can be given quite this much blame for what happened is debatable. But so the king sent Menelaus to Berea, a city of Syria, and there they had him put to death, when he had been high priest 10 years. He had been a wicked and an impious man, Josephus says, and to get the government to himself had compelled his nation to transgress their own laws. After the death of Menelaus, Alcimus was made high priest. Though Alcimus was at least a Levite, and a certain number of people were okay with this appointment, Alcimus was not the next one who would have been high priest if the Seleucids hadn't gotten involved in the first place. The son of Onias, who was the original conservative high priest before all of this started, was also named Onias. And we find out here what happened with him. Now as to Onias, the son of the high priest, who was left a child when his father died, when he saw that the king had slain Menelaus and gave the high priesthood to Alcimus, who was not of the high priestly family, he fled to Ptolemy, king of Egypt. And when he found he was in great esteem with him and with his wife Cleopatra, he desired and obtained, he asked for and got, a place in the Nomus of Heliopolis, wherein he built a temple like that at Jerusalem. So Onias, the rightful high priest, the one who should have been high priest, was not the one picked by the Seleucids. They picked their own man. And Onias lost hope, said, okay, I'm never going to be high priest, and left the country and started his own temple, his own little system of worship in Egypt. And he justified this with scripture, actually. Isaiah chapter 19. Isaiah 19, verses 19 through 21. And I'll go ahead and read this. In that day, there will be an altar to Yahweh in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar to Yahweh near its border. These are prophecies about the great restoration of Israel and the future that God has in store for them. There will be an altar to Yahweh in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar to Yahweh near its border. And it will become a sign and a witness to Yahweh of hosts in the land of Egypt. For they will cry to Yahweh because of oppressors, and he will send them a savior and a champion, and he will deliver them. Thus Yahweh will make himself known to Egypt, and the Egyptians will know Yahweh in that day. They will even worship with sacrifice and offering, and they will make a vow to Yahweh and pay it. Okay? So Onias believed that he was the fulfillment of this prophecy, that he was the one, clearly his place wasn't in Israel, who was going to go to Egypt and build a temple for God. And there would be sacrifices and offerings and an altar to Yahweh in the midst of the land of Egypt. And obviously we would not consider him to be the fulfillment of this prophecy. His temple. We don't know for sure what exactly happened to it and when, from what I understand, but it certainly isn't there today. We don't even know exactly where it was, but we know kind of where the community was that he was a part of. But this ties in quite nicely with what we talked about last week. Remember, last week we looked at the things in Daniel 11 that go beyond what Antiochus Epiphanes did, things that talk about what the Antichrist is going to do. And it says that he will conquer the nations around Egypt. Certain ones, around Israel, certain ones will be spared, but Egypt, it says, will not escape. Egypt will be attacked by the Antichrist, and actually, while he is in Egypt, reports will come that disturb him, and he will go back and attack Israel, and that's when Christ will come and destroy him. So when Christ returns, Egypt will have just been under attack by the Antichrist. He is the one who is going to rescue them. They will cry to Yahweh because of oppressors, Isaiah says, and he will send them a savior and champion, and he will deliver them. Christ will deliver Egypt in the last days, and Egypt will become one of the many nations that will worship him during his kingdom. So that's the ultimate fulfillment of this. That's what it's talking about. Onias believed it was talking about him. And the important point to remember from this is that there is not currently a legitimate high priest left in Israel. They have Alchemist, who nobody really likes among the conservatives. He doesn't belong in that position. But the person who does belong in that position has skipped town. So there's this vacuum created. Who is going to be the next high priest if they get rid of Alchemist? And remember, at this time, whoever was high priest of Israel was basically the governor of Israel. That was the highest position of authority that you could have. All right. Let's go on. One last thing this week. This guy, Demetrius. This is Antiochus IV's nephew. This is the guy who was supposed to be king, not Antiochus's son. His nephew was next in line because Antiochus took over the kingdom from his brother. So Demetrius is the rightful king of the Seleucid kingdom, and he's the one who was being transferred to Rome while Antiochus was coming home and heard about his brother's death and took the kingdom for himself. So Demetrius has been, like Antiochus was before him, a hostage in Rome all this time, and he is finally coming home. He asked the Romans to let him go when he heard that Antiochus IV was dead. The Romans said no, because in the interest of keeping their enemies weak, they thought Antiochus V, he's a kid, he's young, he's impressionable, we can control him much better than we can control Demetrius. So they said, no, Demetrius, you're staying here. Your brother, your cousin, your cousin is going to rule your kingdom. And Demetrius was not happy with that and escaped from Rome. About that same time, on your sheet again, Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, Antiochus's brother, fled away from Rome and took Tripoli, a city of Syria. So a city of Syria, a city that belonged to the Seleucid Empire. He took it over. He landed there. He captured it. And he set the diadem on his own head. He also gathered certain mercenary soldiers together and entered into his kingdom and was joyfully received by all who delivered themselves up to him. So he has a pretty easy time of it. He's a hero. He's the rightful king. He escaped captivity. He's coming back home. The people love this. And when they had taken Antiochus the king and Lysias, they brought them to him alive, both of whom were immediately put to death by the command of Demetrius. And in the books of the Maccabees, it talks about this same thing. And in First Maccabees, it says, Demetrius told his soldiers, "Don't let me see their faces. I don't want to see them." And his soldiers took the hint and executed them. So Lysias and Antiochus V both died, and Demetrius became king of the Seleucid kingdom. They were put to death by the command of Demetrius when Antiochus had reigned 2 years. But there were now many of the wicked Jewish renegades, the bad guys, the Hellenists, that came together to him, and with them Alcimus the high priest, who accused the whole nation, and particularly Judas and his brethren, and said that they had slain all his friends, and that those in his kingdom that were of his party, and waited for his return, were by them put to death, that these men had ejected them out of their own country, and caused them to be sojourners, wanderers, in a foreign land. And they desired, Alcimus and his followers asked, that Demetrius would send some of his own friends and know from whoever he sent, what mischief Judas's party had done. So as all of this was going down in Antioch, in the Seleucid kingdom, Judas was taking advantage of the fact that the army was gone. He didn't like Alcimus. He didn't like a Hellenist being in power, having the high priesthood, and continued to fight against those who wanted to abandon Judaism. And like I pointed out before, this wasn't just a rebellion against an evil empire, Star Wars kind of idea, or even American Revolution idea. It was a civil war also between the Hellenists and the Hebrews. And Alcimus was definitely in the Hellenist camp, the Greek camp. And Judas was killing all of his followers, had kicked Alcimus out of the country, forced him to flee for his life. So Alcimus, of course, went to the Seleucid king, who at this point is Demetrius. And at this, Demetrius was very angry and sent Bacchides, a friend of Antiochus Epiphanes, and one that had been entrusted with all Mesopotamia, and gave him an army, and committed Alcimus the high priest to his care, and gave him charge to slay Judas and those that were with him. So he took a trusted friend, said, take care of this guy, take care of Alcimus, go back to Israel, find out what's happening there, kill this rebel Judas Maccabeus. So Bacchides made haste, and went out of Antioch with his army. And when he was come into Judea, he sent to Judas and his brethren to discourse, to talk with him about a league of friendship and peace, for he had in mind to take him by treachery. But Judas did not believe him, for he saw that he came with so great an army as men. For he saw that he came with so great an army as men do not bring when they come to make peace, but to make war. In other words, if somebody's coming for peace talks, they don't bring this many men with them. And Judas didn't trust him. He doesn't want to make peace. He wants to fight. So we just have that last paragraph. Let's read through it quickly. So he, Bacchides, left him, Alcimus, there with some part of the army, that he might have wherewith to keep the country in obedience, and returned to Antioch to King Demetrius. So Alchemist has this little army now that's his that he can use, and that's at least better for him than it was before. But Alchemist wanted to have the dominion more firmly assured to him, and understanding that if he could bring it about, that the multitude should be his friends. He should govern with greater security. He wants to get the people on his side. So he spoke kind words to them all, by which means he quickly had a great body of men and an army about him, although the greater part of them were of the wicked and the deserters, says Josephus. With these people whom he used as his servants and soldiers, he went all over the country and slew all that he could find of Judas's party. But when Judas saw that Alchemist was already become great and had destroyed many of the good and holy men of the country, he also went all over the country and destroyed those who were of the other party. So at the same time, these armies didn't fight each other, but they just went through the land, killing the supporters of the other group. But when Alchemist saw that he was not able to oppose Judas, nor was equal to him in strength, he resolved to apply himself to King Demetrius for his assistance. He goes back to Demetrius. He realizes that if this keeps going, Judas is going to win. More people are on his side than on Alchemist's side. So he came to Antioch and irrated him, made Demetrius very angry against Judas, and accused Judas, alleging that he would do more mischief unless he was prevented and brought to punishment, which must be done by sending a powerful force against him. So a lot happened, but has the situation really changed at all? And this is it's kind of like watching the sequel to a movie where you thought everything was resolved, but then in the sequel the bad guy comes back and it's the bad guy's son and it's the good guy's son and all of the same things happen again. And it's not great entertainment, but it's realistic history. It's how the world works. Conflicts don't die. When people have disagreements with each other that run this deep, division that runs this deep, it continues from generation to generation. And of course, we're still in the same generation as far as Judea is concerned. A few generations of kings have passed, but we're going to pick this up, and Demetrius from this point on is going to be the bad guy. Alchemist is going to be the main bad high priest. And we're going to find out what happens with Judas and his followers, how this finally comes to a close, how they transition from this on into the next stage of their history. And I considered boiling this down and condensing this significantly. It's hard to do that without actually changing things. And it's just easier to give you the unabridged version, honestly, and to try to figure out how to make it shorter. So I'm sorry if it drags, but things will get resolved pretty soon, I promise. Any questions about what we went over today? All right, let's go ahead and close in prayer. Father, thank you for the fact that you are so in control, again, just of even the nations that oppose you. You're just as sovereign there as you are among us, just as sovereign among unbelievers as you are within your church. That you work all things out to your glory when forces seem so big and out of our control and absolutely unstoppable. Nothing is unstoppable. No one is unstoppable to you. And your will be done. Help us to pray for that, to look to you, to make you our hope and our peace throughout all that we experience. To honor you as you deserve to be honored this morning. To see you more and more fully as you are. In Jesus' name, amen.